So we're doing a routine brake job, pads and rotors on this '07 Honda Ridgeline. The rotors don't look too bad, but they're warped. It's got a pulsation when you apply the brake that shimmies the front wheels. Somebody on YouTube requested that I demonstrate how to remove the rust from this mounting flange. And of course you would do it on the same thing on the rotor if you were reinstalling the rotor. These screws, retaining screws, no, that's the bolt marks. Those are the retaining screws there. They're broken off. They're really just there for assembly purposes. So I'll show you what I use. So I use these Rolox sanding discs, the coarse ones. That's the part number. If you buy these on Amazon, you'll end up with Chinese clones. They're about a third of the price, but they last about a third of the time too. You'll see that there's a rust ridge, and that is hard to get off. So sometimes I'll use a scraper to take that off first. I'll demonstrate that now. So to get this rust here off and any of the flaked rust, I use this air chisel. It's an air scraper actually. It's what brand is it? Ultra Pro, I think. You can see how the rust flakes off. Now I can use the sanding disc a little bit more reliably. You can see there's still a little piece of rust right there. So now you're wondering how to get this in here. I got a couple different ways. We ground the sanding disc down so it's the size of the anvil, so that gets into most of it. This is the only time you wish it was a Volkswagen or an Audi with wheeled bolts instead of studs. That's pretty close. There's still a little tiny bit in between here. I'll use something else I'll show you. So now I've got another die grinder with a bit on it, and then I can clean up these little bits. You want to make sure there's no flaked rust on here. That's pretty much it. That looks pretty good. Now these broken off bolts that one might be just protruding a little bit. I'm going to make sure that the hole in the rotor is in the same spot just to be on the safe side that doesn't cock it. I'm not going to try to get that bolt out of there. Many manufacturers don't put retaining bolts on the rotors. The wheel nuts hold them on. So that's basically it. If you were cleaning the rotor, it'd be the same thing with a Rolox sanding disc, but we're putting new rotors on. I'll put a liberal coating of Never Sees on here. I'll show you in a sec. So I like to wire brush the backing plate off, at least get a little loose rust and loose paint off, and then give it a coat of black enamel paint. And then I put some anti-seize. Somebody mentioned that I refer to it as Never Sees, and Never Sees is technically a brand name. This is called anti-seize from Permatex. Same stuff, I'm sure. Skidoo, Polaris, what's the difference? As I mentioned, these are where the tapered 6mm retaining screws would typically go, so I made sure that the broken screws are in those two holes, just in case they protrude from the rotor or the flange slightly so it doesn't cock the rotor. They are really just there for assembly. I put a spacer and a nut on here to hold it while I'm putting it on, clean the back surface and the brake surface of the rotor with brake cleans and a clean rag and avoid touching it. Now I've already pushed the caliper pistons back in. I'm going to clean up the caliper bracket. So this area where these little clips, stainless steel abutment clips go, must be cleaned, and all the loose rust buildup must be taken off. I use a coarse file, and if it's really bad, sometimes I'll use an air-powered Sawzall just to clean the majority of the rust. Yeah, that's and then put brake grease on it. So once you've cleaned the area under the clip, put some, I use a silicone brake lubricant. Don't use anti-seize here because it's not the right thing. It'll just melt out. And put a coating on there. And then we're going to put another coating of this anti-seize, or brake grease, sorry, not anti-seize, on here for the brake pads themselves. So do the same thing on both sides. I've already pulled these out and wiped them off and greased them. Make sure they're nice and free. If they're corroded or rusty or seized in there, you're going to have to deal with that. I find the file works much better than any sanding discs. There's too much waste with the sanding discs. The file lasts me a year before I have to replace the file. So once you've done that, put a liberal coating of the brake grease. I used to, well, sometimes I will sandblast these brackets and paint them if the car is like a show car or it has really open rims and you can see the brake calipers and brackets. Alright, now we put the bracket back on. So when reinstalling the caliper bracket, these bolts on this truck are 101 foot-pounds. The retaining bolts that hold the caliper on are 53, but double check your specs always because they may differ. Now we put the brake pads in and put the caliper back on. So the inboard brake pad has the wear sensor, and on this vehicle goes on top. So it's on the leading edge of the brake pad because the rotor would normally be turning this direction. And one on the inside, none on the outside. The pads should not be loose in the caliper bracket, and they should move freely in here, but not be loose. Now I don't see that this set of pads had any anti-drag clips, which is like a little metal clip that goes from pad to pad, but this set does not have them. So we're going to put the caliper back on. So on the driver's side, we're missing the back in place. It's rusted off. Now somebody might have suggested that we could use this type of tool to clean around the studs. It's specifically made for cleaning around the studs, but it goes in a die grinder or a drill. But the problem with that is it still doesn't get into that area in there. So I have used this in the past, and there are different size stones for this, or not stones, but buffers, abrasive wheels, whatever you want to call them. But my procedure that I just demonstrated a few minutes ago is what I usually use. And again, that one's clean enough to put the new rotor on. So there's the finished product on one side. I like to give the calipers and the brackets a coat of paint. Just blow off the loose rust and dirt. It looks better through the aluminum wheels. Thanks for watching.